Welcome to the series of everything you need to know about Python in simplest possible way. In the series of pattern printing, so far we have seen so many patterns. In this video, we will see how we can print this particular pattern. So to print this particular pattern, let's say I am taking a variable rows. So why I am taking this variable rows is because to generate these rows, how many number of rows that we are having to keep track of these rows. For that reason, I will take the rows as 5. So why? Because we are having 5 rows here. For that reason, I will take a value as 5. So next, what I will be doing is that if you carefully see this pattern, we not only having numbers, but we also have spaces here. So for that reason, I will take a variable spaces. So to keep track of these spaces. So initially, if you see spaces in the first row, we don't have any spaces apart from numbers. For that reason, I will take the initial value of spaces to be 0. Next, to generate this particular pattern, first I will use a for loop to generate these many number of rows. For that reason, I will use a for loop for I in range. I will generate a range of values. So what are the range of values that I am going to generate is that I will start with rows, I will go till 0, but on each iteration, I will reduce it with -1. Because if you carefully see this pattern, we are starting at 5, that is how many number of rows that we are having, and we are keep reducing this with 1, and we are reaching to the value 0. For that reason, I am starting with the rows, I am going towards 0. So why I have mentioned 0 is because range function don't take the value that what we have mentioned, but it stop with the previous value itself. For that reason, I have mentioned 0 so that it will stop at the value 1. So in the for loop, what I will be doing is that first, to know what are all the values that we are having in I will be printing the value of I. If I print this, I am getting the values as 5, 4, 3, 2, 1 in the next lines. So if you carefully match this particular result with this particular pattern, we are getting 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. So later what we will be doing is that we need to generate these rows, right? We have generated all rows, but we need to generate on each row the values, right? So these values we need to generate. So if you carefully observe these values are repeating. So in the first row, which is a value of 5, 5 values are repeating. In the second row, we are having 4, and 4 values repeating 4 times. What we generally do when we have repeated statement, we generally use loop, right? So for that reason, I will use a one more loop inside of this for loop. So that will become inner loop. So for that reason, I will take a for loop for j in range. I will be generating a range of values. So what are all the range of values that we wanted here? So if you carefully see here, we can actually get this particular values. So it is means that the value that we are holding in this particular value I can be converted into this particular pattern. So for that reason, what I will be doing is that I will start with 1 and I will go till the value of rows plus 1. So I will start with 1 and I will go with not rows plus 1 but I. So because of this by using this I, we can actually generate this pattern, right? So for that reason only, I am going till I plus 1 so that it will start at I. So in this for loop, what I will be doing is that I will print this same value of I. So if I execute this, so we can able to see the result in the new lines of these values. So don't worry about the pattern for now, just understand these particular values. So we are having 5 repeated 5 times, 4 repeated 4 times, 3 repeated 3 times, 2 repeated 2 times, 1 repeated 1 time. That is what exactly the values that we are having here, right? So we have achieved these values. The only thing that what we need to do is that we need to arrange these values to get this particular pattern. So for that reason, what I will be doing is that I will use end parameter. What this end parameter do is that by default print function having an end parameter with new line character. So I wanted to override that new line character with spaces. So if I execute this, I can able to get all the results in a one single line. So that is not also what we wanted. So if we carefully see here, in this for loop, after completion of this for loop, we are directly going to this outer loop and directly coming to this inner loop. Instead of directly going, what I will be doing is that I will mention a print statement. By default, this print statement having this end parameter with new line character, so that after once this inner for loop completed its execution, a new line character would be printed. So if I execute this, I can able to get this particular pattern, which is of fives, fours, threes, twos, ones. So this is not also what we wanted, right? So if you carefully observe what I have said previously, without actually printing spaces, we cannot actually print this particular pattern with this particular numbers, right? So for that reason, we need to print spaces before actually printing numbers. For that reason, what I will be doing is that as and when I enter into this particular outer loop, I will print spaces, so that after printing the spaces, we will enter into this inner for loop and we will print these numbers. I hope that makes sense. So now what I will be doing is that I will take a space and I will multiply this space with the spaces variable. So that is where we have spaces, right? So later what I will be doing is that I will mention an end with nothing, so that if you care, you know, right? End parameter having by default a new line character. We don't new line character after completion of these spaces. For that reason only I am mentioning end as nothing. So if I execute this, still we don't get actual pattern. So the only thing that we need to do is that if you carefully see here, these spaces are increasing on each iteration. So we need to also increase this spaces variable, so that we will get the actual pattern. For that reason, what I will be doing is that after completion of this inner for loop, I will increment these spaces with how many number of values we need to increment is that we need to increment 2 on each iteration. If you carefully see here, for the first row and second row, we have incremented 2 spaces. The third row, we have incremented 4 spaces. For that, I will be using 2, so that on each iteration, I will be incrementing these spaces with 2. So if I execute this, we can able to get the actual pattern that what we have expected. So now I hope you can able to understand how we can get this particular pattern using this logic. So if not, let me explain one more time very quickly, so that you can able to understand it clearly. So first what I will be doing is that I am taking this rows variable to get all these particular rows. So later we have observed that we are not only having these numbers, we are also having these spaces. Without actually printing these spaces, we cannot actually get this pattern. For that reason, to keep track spaces, we are using a variable spaces. So later to generate these rows, we are using this outer for loop with a range of values from starting with rows until 1. So for that reason, we have used these particular parameters here. Later, we are printing spaces because first we need to print spaces before actually printing numbers. For that reason, we are printing these spaces first. Later, what we will be doing is that we are going to inner for loop to actually generate these values on each row. For that reason only, we are starting with 1 and we are going till I, because we need to print. We have understood in this step that based on this value I, we can actually print all of these values, all of these patterns. For that reason only, we are going till the value I. Later, we are printing the value I, and at last, we are incrementing these spaces, because on each iteration, the spaces are incremented by the value 2. So for that reason only, we have incremented with 2. So now what we will be doing is that we will take the input of rows dynamically from the user. For that reason, I am taking input. I am asking user to enter any number. So if I execute this, it was asking me to enter any number. If I give the value of 5, we can get this result what we have expected. Let me give one more number. Let's say I am giving the value as 8. So still we can able to get this pattern starting with 8 going till the value 1. If I give one more value, let's say I am giving 7 here. So still we can able to get this particular pattern. So I hope you can able to understand. I hope you have found this video interesting, and I hope you have understood this logic to generate this particular pattern. If that is true, hit the like button. In the next video, we will be seeing how we can print this particular pattern. So to stay updated, subscribe to this channel and hit the notifications to all so that whenever I upload any video, you will get the notification. So thank you for watching this video. See you in the next one.